Right now, somewhere in your wallet, there's a card that thinks it knows you better than you know yourself. It knows the exact day your paycheck hits. It knows you'll pay something instead of everything. And it knows that something is exactly what it's counting on. Here's the question nobody asks out loud. What if the minimum payment was never designed to help you pay off your debt, but to keep you paying it forever? Stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to show you isn't opinion, it's math. Numbers the bank prints in tiny gray letters on the back of a statement you've probably never fully read. And by the end, you'll understand why some of the most careful, responsible people you know are still carrying a balance they can't fully explain. This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about finally seeing the trap for what it really is and learning how to walk out of it with your eyes wide open, one honest number at a time. Let's start with the number that most people never actually see, because nobody hands it to you on purpose. Say you owe $5,000 on a credit card. Not an extreme number. Not a horror story. Just a normal balance. The kind millions of people carry right now, quietly in the background of their lives. The card charges you 22% interest a year. Also normal. Also the kind of number people glance at and forget in about 4 seconds. Now, every month, you do the responsible thing. You don't ignore the bill. You don't skip it. You pay the minimum, right on time, like a good citizen. Here's what almost nobody tells you. If you only pay the minimum on that $5,000 balance, it will take you close to 30 years to pay it off. 30 years. And somewhere along that road, you will have paid more in interest than the original debt itself. Sometimes double, sometimes more. Read that again, because it deserves to sit for a second. 30 years to erase $5,000, long enough to watch a child grow from kindergarten to graduate school, long enough to change 3 jobs, 2 homes, maybe a marriage. And the whole time, that number just sits there in the background, quietly multiplying. Now, why would a bank design a payment system that takes 30 years to work? Because it isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended. The minimum payment isn't a mercy. It isn't the bank saying, "Take your time, we understand life is hard." It's a formula, carefully built, calculated down to the decimal, to keep the balance alive for as long as legally possible while collecting interest on every single day. It survives. Think about that phrase for a second. Interest on every single day, it survives. That's not an accident of math. That's the business model. Most minimum payments are set at somewhere around 1 to 3% of your balance, or a small flat fee, whichever is higher. On paper, that sounds harmless, a tiny slice. But here's the part that changes everything once you see it. That tiny slice is calculated to cover the interest that piled up that month, plus just barely enough principal to make it look like progress. It's designed to feel like movement, while barely moving at all. I want you to picture something. Imagine walking on a treadmill, and every step you take, the belt speeds up just slightly to match you. You're sweating, you're working, your legs are tired at the end of the day. But you're standing in the exact same spot you started. That's what a minimum payment does to a balance carried year after year. It creates the sensation of effort without the reality of progress. And this is where it gets personal. Because I know some of you listening have done everything right. You didn't buy something reckless. Maybe it was a medical bill, a car repair you couldn't avoid, A rough year where the card became the bridge between one paycheck and the next. You told yourself, I'll pay it down when things settle. But the trap isn't in the spending. The trap is in the structure. The bank isn't waiting for you to make a mistake. The system is built so that even doing the responsible minimum, month after month, quietly works against you. Here's a number that tends to land hard with people over 40, because you've lived long enough to feel time differently than you did at 25. If you took that same $5,000 balance and paid just $100 more each month than the minimum, you could cut that payoff time from nearly 30 years down to under 5. Same debt, same interest rate. The only difference is refusing to let the minimum define you. That's not a hack. That's not a secret code. It's simply understanding what the minimum payment actually is. A number engineered to be just enough to keep you compliant, and just small enough to keep you paying. And I think that's the part that stings the most once you really sit with it. It's not that the bank is lying to you. The minimum payment amount is right there on your statement, printed in plain numbers. Nobody's hiding it. What's hidden is the meaning of that number, what it's really built to do. Because minimum payment due sounds like a bare minimum requirement, a small technical box to check. It doesn't sound like a 30-year contract. It doesn't sound like a decision that could quietly follow you into your 50s, 60s, even retirement. Some of you know exactly what I'm describing, because you're living it right now. An old balance. Maybe from years ago. Still there. Still charging. Still whispering, just pay the minimum, that's enough. While it costs you far more than you ever agreed to in your mind. I'm not telling you this to make you feel foolish. I'm telling you this because once you see the design, you can't unsee it. And once you can't unsee it, you start making different choices. Not out of fear, out of clarity. Because the goal was never to make this complicated. It was to make it invisible. And in the next few minutes, we're going to pull back another layer of that invisibility together. A few months ago, maybe longer, you probably got a message. Short, friendly, almost cheerful. Good news, your credit limit has increased. And for a second, it felt good, didn't it? Like a small pat on the back. Like someone, somewhere, had reviewed your file and decided you'd earned something. I want to gently take that feeling apart, because it's one of the most quietly effective illusions in personal finance. A credit limit increase is not a reward. It's not recognition. It's not the bank saying, we see how hard you've worked, and we're proud of you. I know that's how it's framed. I know that's how it feels. But strip away the friendly language, and what's actually happening is simpler and colder than that. The bank is running numbers on your account, the same way a store manager runs numbers on inventory. They're not asking, does this person deserve more trust? They're asking, how much more can this account safely carry before the risk of default outweighs the profit potential? That's the real question behind the smiling notification. And here's the part that reframes everything. Banks don't make most of their money from people who pay their balance in full every month. Those customers, the ones with perfect discipline, cost the bank money in a way. They use the card, sure, but they don't generate ongoing interest. In the industry, they're sometimes called transactors. Useful, but not the main event. The real profit engine is the revolver. Someone who carries a balance month to month, paying interest continuously. And a higher credit limit does something very specific to a revolver. It gives them more room to carry more debt, for longer, at the same high interest rate. Think about it like this. If a store gave you a bigger shopping cart every time you filled up the one you had, would you assume they were rewarding your loyalty? Or would you start to wonder if a bigger cart was designed to make you buy more? That's what a credit limit increase quietly does. It's a bigger cart, handed to you at the exact moment your spending pattern shows you're most likely to fill it. Banks use behavioral data most people never think about. How close you typically run to your limit. How consistently you make payments, even if they're just the minimum. How long you've held the card. How your spending trends month over month. When those signals line up in a certain way. An algorithm. Not a person sitting in an office deciding you deserve it. Triggers the increase. It's not personal. It's pattern recognition. And the pattern it's looking for isn't responsible person. It's profitable customer, safely extendable. Now here's where this becomes something worth sitting with, especially if you're over 40 and you've watched your own credit limits climb over the decades without ever really questioning why. A higher limit changes your psychology, even if you never plan to use it. Just knowing that $10,000 is available instead of 5,000 shifts something in how a purchase feels. That unexpected car repair, that home appliance that finally gave out, that family emergency. They all feel more affordable when there's more room on the card. Not because your income changed, not because your savings grew, just because the number went up. This is one of the reasons credit utilization plays such a strange trick on people. Your utilization ratio, how much of your available credit you're actually using, is one of the biggest factors in your credit score. So when your limit rises and your balance stays the same, your utilization ratio drops, and your score can actually improve. It looks like good news. It feels like validation. But look at what actually happened underneath that. You didn't pay down a single dollar. You didn't change a single habit. The number simply moved, and your brain read it as progress. That's the trap, spoken plainly. A credit limit increase can raise your score while doing absolutely nothing to improve your actual financial position. It can make you feel safer while making you, statistically, a more valuable long-term customer for the very system that profits from your balance sitting there. I'm not saying every credit limit increase is a trap you need to fear. Used with intention, more available credit and a lower utilization ratio genuinely can help you, especially if you never touch the extra room at all. The tool isn't evil, but the story attached to it. You earned this. This is a compliment. That story deserves a second look. Because once you understand that the increase exists to serve the bank's model first, you get to decide clearly and on your own terms whether it serves you too. And once you start seeing the credit limit for what it really is, a small door opens in your mind. You start wondering what else has been dressed up as a favor. What other gotchas are sitting quietly inside the fine print you've never had a reason to read carefully? That's exactly where we're headed next, and it involves a mistake so small, so easy to make, that almost no one realizes how much it can cost until it's already too late. Here's a mistake so ordinary, so human, that almost everyone reading this has made it at least once without knowing what it actually cost them. You're busy. Life happens. A statement due date slips past you by a day, maybe two. You catch it, you pay it. You feel a small flash of embarrassment, and you move on. No big deal, right? You paid it. A little late, but paid. Except that single late payment can quietly do something most people never find out about until years later, if ever. It can wipe out your grace period. Not just on that one purchase, on everything. Let's slow down, because this is one of those details buried so deep in the fine print that even people who read their statements carefully often miss it. A grace period is the window of time between when you make a purchase and when interest actually starts being charged on it, as long as you pay your full balance by the due date. It's the reason so many people believe, correctly, that if you pay in full every month, you never pay a dime of interest. That grace period is the entire foundation of responsible credit card use. It's the safety net underneath the whole system. But that safety net has a condition attached to it, one that's rarely spoken out loud in plain English. You generally have to pay your statement balance in full by the due date every single time to keep that grace period active. Miss it once, even by a day, and depending on the card's terms, you can lose the grace period entirely. Not just for the purchase that was late. For every new purchase you make going forward, starting immediately, interest can begin accruing from the day you buy something, not from some future due date. The cushion is gone. Imagine this. You've used a card responsibly for years, paid in full every month like clockwork. Then one month, life gets loud. A trip, a hospital visit, a death in the family. Something knocks you off your rhythm, and a payment goes out a day or two late. From that point forward, unless the terms of your specific card say otherwise, every new purchase can start collecting interest immediately. That morning coffee, that tank of gas, that Tuesday grocery run, they're not waiting for a due date anymore. They're already costing you money the moment you swipe. And here's the part that stings the most. Most people don't even notice right away, because the change is invisible. There's no alarm, no warning banner, just a slightly higher balance next month and a slightly higher one the month after that. And if you're not paying close attention, you might spend months, even years, wondering why a card you used to beat is suddenly costing you money every cycle. This is why I called it the one-day mistake that costs you thousands. Because if that pattern continues quietly in the background for a year or two, the interest that accumulates from lost grace periods can absolutely stack up into thousands of dollars over time, especially on cards with higher balances or higher interest rates. Now, I want to be fair here, because the details vary from issuer to issuer, and some cards are more forgiving than others, especially for a first-time slip. Some will only apply penalty terms after multiple late payments. Some will restore your grace period after a certain number of consecutive on-time payments. This isn't universal, and it isn't the same for every card in every wallet. But the pattern is common enough and consequential enough that it deserves your full attention, not a quick skim. Here's what I want you to take from this. More than any single number, the grace period isn't a permanent gift. It's a conditional privilege, one that can vanish quietly the moment a due date is missed, even by accident, even with the best intentions in the world. That single fact reframes something a lot of people over 40 have felt, but never quite named. That sense that I did everything right for years, and then suddenly this card started costing me more. It's not always a mystery. Sometimes it's one missed date, quietly changing the rules on everything that came after it. And once you see the grace period for what it actually is, conditional, fragile, easily lost, you start protecting it the way you'd protect anything valuable. Not out of anxiety, out of respect for what it's actually worth. There's a practical takeaway hiding inside all of this, and it's simpler than it sounds. Autopay, set for at least the minimum, isn't a small convenience. It's a guardrail against a mistake that can quietly cost you far more than the missed payment itself. Not because you're careless, but because life is unpredictable and the system isn't built to forgive unpredictability. It's built to profit from it. And that phrase, built to profit from it, is going to come up again in a moment, because there's another layer to this trap, one that hides behind the appearance of doing everything right. It's the part almost nobody talks about, and once you hear it, you'll understand why some of the most careful people you know are still, quietly, the bank's best customers. I want to introduce you to someone, and I have a feeling you already know them. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe, if we're being honest, it's you. This person isn't reckless with money. They don't max out cards on impulse buys. They check their statement every month. They pay more than the minimum, sometimes a lot more. They feel, genuinely, like they're handling it. And yet, year after year, the balance never quite disappears. It shrinks a little, then a purchase comes up and it grows a little. It shrinks, it grows, like a tide that never fully goes out. Here's the uncomfortable truth hiding underneath that pattern. That person, the one who pays more than the minimum but not the full balance, month after month, is the most valuable customer a credit card company has, not the person who ignores their bills, not the person who maxes out and defaults. Those customers are actually risky, and risk costs banks money. The golden customer, the one the entire system is quietly optimized around, is the person who's disciplined enough to keep paying, responsible enough to never miss a due date, but never quite pays it all the way down. In the industry, this person has a name, one you're not really meant to hear: the ideal revolver. Let that sit for a second, because there's something almost unsettling about it. The very qualities that make you feel like you're doing it right, consistency, discipline, keeping the account current, are the exact qualities that make you the most profitable person in the room from the bank's perspective. Think about the math for a moment, plainly, without the industry language. A customer who pays their balance in full every month generates almost no interest revenue. A customer who defaults becomes a write-off, a loss the bank has to absorb and account for. But a customer who reliably pays, say, 3 or 4 times the minimum, keeping the account in good standing while still carrying a rotating balance, that person generates steady, predictable, long-term interest income with very low risk of ever defaulting. That's not an accident of behavior. That's the target profile. And once you know that's the target, you start to notice how many features of the system are quietly built to keep someone in exactly that zone. Rewards points that make spending feel productive. Low minimums that make partial payments feel sufficient. Statement designs that highlight your available credit far more prominently than your actual debt. None of it is a conspiracy in the dramatic sense. It's simply a business, optimized over decades, around what keeps a disciplined customer disciplined and revolving at the same time. I think this hits differently for people over 40, because you've had decades to build that identity of being good with money. You've watched younger relatives make the reckless mistakes you didn't make. You've felt, quietly, a little pride in your discipline. And there's nothing wrong with that pride. It's often earned, but discipline inside a poorly understood system isn't the same as freedom from that system. You can be careful and still be exactly where the model wants you. Those two things aren't contradictions. They can be true at the same time, and for a lot of people, they are. Here's what separates someone who's merely disciplined from someone who's actually breaking the pattern. The goal isn't to pay more than the minimum. The goal is to pay it down to zero, on purpose, with an actual endpoint in mind, rather than treating a slightly more than minimum payment as a sustainable long-term strategy. Because more than the minimum without a plan to reach zero isn't progress. It's a slower version of the same treadmill we talked about earlier, just moving at a pace that feels more comfortable, more responsible, more like control. I'm not saying this to take away your sense of doing well. I'm saying it because real control looks different than steady payments on a balance that never fully leaves. Real control has a finish line, a date, even a rough one, where the balance hits zero and stays there. If you're listening to this, and you realize you've been the reliable, responsible revolver for years, I want you to know that recognizing the pattern is not the same as failing at it. It's the first real step out of it. Most people never even get this far because the system was never designed to make this visible. You just made it visible to yourself. And that changes what happens next. Because there's one more layer to this, maybe the most consequential one of all. It has to do with a single clause, buried in the fine print, that can quietly rewrite the terms of your entire relationship with a card, sometimes permanently, after just one mistake. And almost nobody knows it's there until it's already been triggered. It doesn't announce itself with a warning letter or a phone call. It simply activates, and from that point forward, the math of everything you thought you understood about your own card changes underneath you. Let's name the clause directly, because it deserves to be spoken plainly, not buried in legal language. It's called the Penalty APR. Here's how it works, stripped of the fine print. Most credit cards carry a standard interest rate, the number you probably associate with your card when someone asks. 14%, 18%, 22%, whatever yours happens to be. That's the rate you live with day to day, the one built into your understanding of the card. But tucked into the terms and conditions, the document almost nobody reads in full, there's usually a second rate, a much higher one. Sometimes 10, 15, even 20 percentage points higher than your standard rate. And that second rate isn't hypothetical. It's not a worst-case scenario reserved for people who default entirely. It can be triggered by something as ordinary, as human, as a single payment that arrives 60 days late. 60 days. 2 months. Not 60 years of reckless spending. 2 months of being late, sometimes because of a genuine hardship, a job loss, a medical crisis, a family emergency. And the rate on your card can jump dramatically, sometimes overnight. And here's the detail that turns this from inconvenient into genuinely life-altering for some people. Once that penalty rate is triggered, it doesn't always apply only to new purchases going forward. Depending on the terms of your specific card and how long the payment stayed overdue, it can sometimes apply to your existing balance as well. The debt you already owe, retroactively recalculated at the new, higher rate. Suddenly, the $5,000 you were slowly working down at 18% is accruing interest at 29, 30, sometimes higher. The payoff math we talked about earlier, the 30 years, the doubled interest, all of it gets worse. Sometimes dramatically worse. Now here's the part that I think deserves the most attention, because it's the part that surprises people the most. This penalty rate isn't necessarily temporary. Some people assume that once they catch up, once they start paying on time again, the rate will quietly go back to normal, the way a late fee gets forgiven after good behavior. But that's not how penalty APRs are required to work. Depending on the card's specific terms and the applicable regulations, a penalty rate can remain in place for 6 months of consistent on-time payments, before a bank is even required to consider lowering it back down, and there's often no guarantee it goes back to exactly where it started. In some cases, it simply becomes the new normal, indefinitely, unless you take deliberate action, like requesting a review, or, in some cases, opening a different account entirely. Sit with that for a moment. A single 60-day lapse, sometimes during the worst month of someone's life, can quietly reshape the cost of their debt for years afterward. Not because they're careless, not because they don't understand money, because life happened at the exact wrong moment, and the system doesn't pause to ask why. I think this is the piece that hits hardest for people over 40, because by this age, most of us have lived through at least one season where everything happened at once. A parent's health crisis, a layoff, a divorce, a roof that needed replacing the same month the car transmission failed. Those seasons don't check your credit card terms before they hit. And the Penalty APR clause doesn't check your circumstances before it activates. This isn't meant to frighten you into paralysis. It's meant to do something more useful, to make the invisible visible, so you can protect yourself before a hard season turns into a permanently more expensive one. Because once you know a single missed payment at the 60-day mark can quietly rewrite your interest rate for years, you start treating that due date differently. Not out of fear, out of respect for what's actually at stake behind a number that used to feel like just another bill. And when you understand all 5 of these mechanisms together, the minimum payment, the credit limit, the grace period, the profitable revolver, the penalty rate, you start to see something bigger than any one trick. You start to see a system. Not a villain twirling a mustache somewhere, but a machine built over decades, optimized quietly, patiently, to turn ordinary human moments, a late payment, a rough month, a little extra spending, into long-term profit. And once you see the machine clearly, you stop reacting to it emotionally, and you start making decisions from a place of understanding instead. That shift, from reacting to understanding, is really what this entire conversation has been about. Not shame, not fear. Just enough light shined into the corners of the fine print that you never have to feel blindsided by your own card again. And there's still more worth saying before we close this out together, including one thing I think matters more than any number we've covered so far. If you've made it this far with me, sitting with all of this, I want to pause for just a second and say something simple. Thank you for staying. Not everyone does. And the fact that you're still here tells me you're someone who actually wants to understand your money, not just be told what to do with it. If that's true for you, I'd genuinely love it if you subscribed to this channel and stuck around. We talk about exactly this kind of thing here, regularly, without the noise, without the shouting, without pretending there's a magic trick that fixes everything overnight. Just honest conversations about how money actually works, especially for people who've lived enough life to know that most quick fixes are usually selling something. And here's something I've noticed, doing this work, talking to people your age, my age, about money. So many of you didn't grow up being taught any of this. Nobody sat you down and explained what a grace period actually was, or what a penalty APR could do, or why a bigger credit limit wasn't a compliment. You learned by living it, sometimes by getting burned by it. And there's no shame in that. There's only the choice of what you do with the understanding now that you have it. So let me ask you honestly, in the comments below this video, which one of these 5 hit you the hardest? Was it the minimum payment trap? The 30 years hiding inside a number that looked small? Was it realizing that being the responsible partial payer might actually make you the bank's favorite customer? Or was it the penalty APR, the idea that one hard season could quietly follow you for years? I read these comments. I want to know which one landed, because it tells me what to dig into more deeply for you next. All right, let's bring this back around, because there's one more thing worth saying before we close, and it might be the most important one of all. Everything we've talked about today, the minimum payment, the credit limit, the grace period, the profitable revolver, the penalty rate, they all share one thing in common. None of them are secrets, exactly. They're not hidden in some vault. They're printed in black and white, somewhere in the paperwork you agreed to. What makes them powerful isn't secrecy. It's silence. Nobody explains what they actually mean in plain language, in the moment it matters. And that silence isn't an accident either. A confused customer is often a more profitable customer. Confusion keeps people paying the minimum because they don't fully grasp what it costs them. Confusion keeps people celebrating a credit limit increase instead of questioning it. Confusion keeps people missing due dates without understanding what that single mistake can trigger. So if there's one thing I want you to walk away with, more than any single number, it's this. Clarity is the actual tool here. Not a trick, not a hack. Just understanding what you already agreed to. Well enough that nothing about your own card can quietly surprise you again. That doesn't mean cutting up every card, swearing off credit, living entirely in cash forever. Credit, used with clear eyes, can be one of the most useful tools you'll ever have. It can build your history, protect you in emergencies, even earn you real value back. The problem was never the tool. The problem was using a powerful tool without ever being shown how it actually works. Now you've been shown. And what you do with that is entirely yours. There's a quiet kind of confidence that comes from finally understanding something that used to feel like a mystery. It's not loud. Nobody hands you a trophy for it. But the next time a statement arrives, you'll read it differently. You'll notice the due date with a little more respect. You'll look at that limit increase notification and feel something closer to awareness than flattery. That shift, small as it sounds, is worth more than most financial advice you'll ever hear, because it's yours now. Nobody can take understanding away from you once you've earned it honestly. I want you to think for just a moment about someone in your life who's carrying one of these traps right now without knowing it. A sibling stuck on minimum payments. A friend proud of a credit limit increase they don't fully understand. A neighbor who missed one payment and can't figure out why their rate jumped. You know someone, everyone does. Maybe the most valuable thing you do after watching this isn't changing your own habits, though I hope you do that too. Maybe it's sending this to them. Not with judgment, just with the quiet gift of, hey, I think this might help you see something I didn't see for years myself. That's how understanding actually spreads. Not through shame, through someone caring enough to pass it along. And with that, let's bring this all the way home, because there's one last thought I don't want to rush past. There's an old habit most of us picked up somewhere along the way, without ever choosing it on purpose. We treat the credit card statement like weather, something that happens to us, a number that arrives, gets paid, and disappears until next month, as unquestioned as rain. But a statement isn't weather. It's a letter, written by a system that knows exactly what it's doing, sent to someone it's hoping won't ask too many questions. You ask the questions today. That's the whole difference. Think back to where we started. A card in your wallet that seemed to know your rhythms better than you did. By now, you know it wasn't reading your mind. It was reading a formula. The minimum payment, engineered to feel like enough while barely moving the needle. The credit limit, dressed up as a compliment while quietly expanding the size of the trap. The grace period, generous right up until the moment it wasn't, gone the instant a due date slipped by unnoticed. The responsible revolver, praised by no one, profiting the system the most precisely because they never fully paid it off. And the penalty rate, waiting patiently for one hard season to turn into years of higher cost. 5 different mechanisms, one shared design. Keep the balance alive, keep the customer calm, keep the whole thing quiet enough that it never quite feels worth questioning. It works quietly on millions of people who never had a reason to look closer. Not because they're careless, but because nobody ever sat them down and said, out loud, in plain language, here's what's actually happening underneath the number. You questioned it anyway. That matters more than it might feel like right now. I'm not going to stand here and tell you this changes everything overnight, because that would be exactly the kind of hollow promise I told you at the start I wasn't interested in making. Understanding a trap doesn't dissolve it in an instant. The balance you have today is still there tomorrow morning. The card in your wallet still works the same way it did yesterday. But something else is different now, and it's not small. You're not going to look at that next statement the same way. You're not going to feel flattered by a credit limit increase without a second thought behind it. You're not going to let a due date slip by thinking, it's just one day, it won't matter. You know now what one day can cost. You know now what responsible sometimes actually means to the system watching you. That knowing is the whole transformation. Quiet. Internal. Yours. There's a particular kind of freedom that doesn't look like anything dramatic from the outside. Nobody throws a parade for it. It's just a person, sitting with their statement, reading it the way it was always meant to be read, clearly, without illusions, without flattery, without fear either. Just clearly. That's what today was actually about. Somewhere out there, a bank is running the same numbers it's always run, on someone who doesn't yet know what you know now. That's not a reason for guilt. It's just the way the system was always going to keep working on someone. Until enough people started asking the questions you ask today. You can't fix the whole system in one video. Nobody can. But you can make sure it stops working quite so easily on you and on the people you decide to tell. I think about the version of each of us who didn't have this conversation, who kept paying the minimum without knowing why it never seemed to end, who felt proud of a limit increase they never questioned, who missed a payment during a hard month and spent years afterward wondering why the numbers stopped making sense. That version of you isn't foolish. That version of you just didn't have the light on yet. The light's on now. If this reached you the way I hoped it would, I want to ask you for something simple, and something that actually matters more than any single view or comment. Follow this channel so we can keep having conversations like this one, honestly, without the noise the rest of the internet seems to think this topic requires. And if you know 5 people, just 5, who are carrying one of these traps right now without realizing it, share this with them. Not as a lecture, just as the thing you wish someone had shared with you. Leave a comment below, an honest one, about where you actually stand with this. Maybe it's relief, Because you finally understand something that's confused you for years. Maybe it's something heavier, a balance you've been carrying quietly, a mistake you're only now understanding the real cost of. Either way, say it plainly, and tell me what you want us to dig into next, because these conversations only get sharper when you tell me where it actually hurts. Maybe it's how to actually pay down a balance faster without wrecking your monthly budget. Maybe it's how these same mechanisms show up in car loans or mortgages, or the fine print on a store card you signed up for just to save 15% at checkout. Whatever it is, tell me. This channel exists because people like you keep showing up honest. Until then, take care of the number on that statement the way you'd take care of anything that's been quietly working against you without your permission, for longer than you probably realized. Read it closely, question it kindly, and never ever let it read you again. Because now, finally, and for good, you're the one holding the pen.